Welcome and thank you for joining us today for Zero Trust Networking, how network teams support cybersecurity. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be moderating today's event. Our featured speaker is Shamus McGillicuddy, VP of Research covering network infrastructure and operations at EMA. Shamus has nearly 2 decades of experience in the IT industry. His research focuses on all aspects of managing enterprise networks, including network automation, AIOps-driven network operations, multi-cloud networking, and WAN transformation. And before I hand it over to Shamus, I wanted the audience to know that Shamus will be wrapping up his presentation by taking your questions. Feel free to log them anytime by using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email from EMA with the on-demand playback, as well as additional information about this new research. So I hope you'll check that email out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our featured speaker, Shamus McGillicuddy. Shamus?
Thanks, Raleigh. And thank you everyone for joining me today. So as Raleigh noted, this webinar focuses on new research on zero trust networking and how network engineering teams in particular are supporting zero trust initiatives inside the enterprise. It's a independent piece of research that was with multiple sponsors, the two of which are highlighted here, CloudBrink and Efficient IP. So thank you to those two companies for making it financially possible for me to do this independent research. Oh, went the wrong way there, sorry. So before we get into key findings of this report that I'll run through shortly, I wanted to just talk about research goals and methodology. First of all, this research is based on a survey that was conducted last month, or 2 months ago, actually. October. Usually takes us about a month to go from data collection to publishing a report. We surveyed 270 IT decision makers who work for companies or organizations that had or have a zero trust initiative in place. Either they had implemented some zero trust architecture around their network, or they were in the middle of implementing it, or they are doing some deep research and testing and evaluation of solutions to proceed. Anyone who told us that they weren't really engaged in a meaningful way, for instance, yes, I've heard of zero trust, I know what it is, but I'm not really looking at it right now. Those people were kicked out of the survey. So as you can see from this slide, we kind of looked at organizations of all kinds and surveyed people from different perspectives within those technology organizations inside a company. So you have a lot of engineers and architects, you have a lot of middle management types who are running project teams or running groups or divisions of an IT organization, and you have a lot of technology executives like VPs, CIOs, CTOs, CISOs. They're coming to us from cybersecurity, security operations, cloud groups, network operations groups, network engineering groups, IT infrastructure groups. There were more than a dozen industries represented in the survey, but these on the right are the most numerous: manufacturing, retail, financial companies, and professional services not related to IT, so legal, accounting, things like that. And then a healthy number of healthcare organizations. Sorry, that is a pun. I didn't mean to do that. Construction, oil, gas. It was a transatlantic survey, and we tried to get a broad swath of company sizes. So you see a lot of mid-sized companies that are less than 5,000 employees, but you also see some very large companies, 20,000 or more people working for them. And then the goal of the research was to understand how network teams enable zero trust, because as an analyst, as research analyst, I focus in on that persona, the network engineering professional, the network operations professional. And as a result, like, I don't necessarily position myself as a zero trust analyst because that's a cybersecurity initiative, and it's often there are a lot of security vendors that sell products in that area. But it's but like in my experience, it's like the CISO organization, the security architecture group, the cybersecurity group that's sort of setting the agenda. Um, but a lot of the technology actually is network technology and requires network expertise and has an impact on how the network works. And so I've always had the sense of it being very much a network initiative, even if it's pushed and defined by security. And in my conversations with people anecdotally, like that's how it plays out. Um, Quite often, the network team works with cybersecurity on defining how to do zero trust, and then a lot of times they implement and manage the technology that enables it. And so, this research kind of approached it from that lens, and the goal here was like, how does that play out? And we have a couple of charts here that sort of highlight what we're finding. What role does your company's network team play in zero trust security on the left? You see nearly 66% are implementing some kind of technology. So they're designing and building new network architecture or new networking solutions to enable it. 64% say they are doing ongoing operations for zero trust infrastructure, like monitoring things, making changes, adjusting policies. And then you see a lot of them are also evaluating and selecting solutions and setting overall security strategy, zero trust security strategy. On the right, you see like how that plays out in relation to the cybersecurity team that is most likely kind of um, leading things nominally. Um, 44% told us that the network team is equal partners to the security group. Both groups kind of lead strategy together. And people who came from that kind of organization also incidentally told us that their overall zero trust security strategy was more successful. We'll get into success and failure in a little bit overall, but here it emerged as a best practice. Like people from organizations where the network team was not a consultative partner or engaged on an ad hoc basis in zero trust, but are actually co-leading the project. Those guys are doing the best. And I kind of touched on this already, but why is the network team critical to zero trust security? Well, network engineering has the expertise and also the ownership of a lot of the enabling technology, such as secure remote access. Who owns the VPN in your company? Is probably the network team. Network segmentation. Who knows about VLANs and ACLs and who is probably managing the firewall that like segments parts of your network through like hairpinning or tromboning of traffic or whatever you want to call it. Also who has the monitoring tools that really look at what's happening on your network and not just from a performance perspective, but possibly like a security perspective too, like indicators of suspicious activity. Uh, so they own the network observability tools that can really help you understand what's happening on a network, which is important because one of the things that if you look at the right, factors that influence zero trust implementation. So this is basically like, what are your guiding principles for zero trust security in your organization? And you see the top two responses by a mile or maybe half a mile are eliminating unauthorized access, meaning like, hey, let's modernize our secure remote access and our network access control tools to make them more robust and granular in terms of policy. Um, that's the number one guiding principle. Number two, impact on network performance. Um, that is that is critical. That is underappreciated. I don't think people really talk about this enough when they're talking about like, hey, let's do zero trust. They don't talk about how making changes to network architecture to support a zero trust principles or zero trust concepts is going to impact how people experience the network when they're trying to do business and get things done. And then secondarily, you see management simplicity is important, architectural flexibility, and bottom of this list, eliminating lateral movement, which I think is kind of a foundational principle of zero trust, but it's not top of mind for the people in the survey. It's the access piece, not the lateral movement piece that they seem to be most focused on, which is a concern. 97% also told us that overall network performance is influential on zero trust. Like we asked them straight up, like, would you say that you think that it's important to keep track of how network performance is impacted by zero trust? 97% said yes on just that straight up question, not a multiple choice, which is what you see in the top of that right-hand side. So let's talk about network observability and why it's important. Before we get into like the architectural changes, the visibility I think is important. Network teams are applying their observability tools to zero trust. 96% of the people in our survey, and keep in mind this is like security people, cloud people, NetOps, network engineering, IT executives. 96% of the people in our survey said that network teams have tools that are at least somewhat important to supporting a zero trust initiative. What are they observing with those tools? They're trying to see DNS queries, which can be indicators of malicious activity or policy violations based on like what zones you're allowed to go to, et cetera. They're looking at source and destination IPs. Sorry for the non-capitalized P there. They're looking at bandwidth utilization and user behavior. The bandwidth utilization piece can be an indicator of malicious activity, but it also plays into the piece I talked about earlier, which is how are zero trust segmentation, zero trust access controls impacting network performance, and bandwidth utilization can help them track that. User behavior, that can be an indicator of suspicious behavior, but it also can be an indicator of like what, are users having issues with performance when they go through this part of our network, et cetera. And then in terms of use cases for applying observability zero trust, number one by a wide margin was threat detection and response, and then secondarily policy performance, both very security related. But number three was performance management. Like performance management needs to be actively managed on a zero trust network. It should be actively managed always, but I think the point is that the network team really needs to keep an eye on how a zero trust implementation impacts performance as they're planning, implementing, and then operating a zero trust environment. We also dug into DNS since it is like the number one thing that they're trying to observe with observability. It makes sense. How might real-time analysis of DNS traffic help support your zero trust initiative? The two big ones were we see it as an opportunity to optimize network segmentation. We can see like how DNS queries are moving and what kinds of DNS records or what kinds of domains are being talked to, etc. It can help us make sure that the network communications are efficient in whatever schemes we've set up to protect our networks. And then threat detection, we can see malicious DNS queries coming through. We can see indicators of like, people hiding malicious activity within DNS queries. We can see like, oh, there's certain domains we don't want to be talking to. They're known malicious domains, and those are coming in. And then, and actually that touches on number three there, data exfiltration, like being able to see like data exfiltration hidden in a DNS query is really important. That's a common piece of methodology that threat actors are using. And then other ways on the right that network teams are exploring DNS-based zero trust solutions, like, how else do you think DNS can help you as a network, because network teams are the experts on DNS. Like, how else do you think you can leverage DNS to support your zero trust efforts? More than half identified these four: DNS-based policy enforcement. Like, okay, I'm going to use DNS to block these kinds of domains. Enhanced device authentication. Reduced attack surface with secure DNS technology. And DNS-based segmentation. So those are all examples of how DNS can help you with a zero trust initiative. And then secure remote access is kind of the thing that people are that's top of mind for zero trust right now. We already noted it's the guiding principle for the number one guiding principle for a zero trust strategy based on the 270 people that we surveyed was eliminating unauthorized access. And really that's all about modernizing secure remote access. 94% of the people we surveyed said that they are or have modernized their secure remote access technology to address their zero trust requirements. And we asked them, what are the most important things you look for in a secure remote access solution that supports your zero trust goals? Like you're getting rid of your old stuff, you bring in new stuff. What do you look for when you're validating a product, putting together an RFP for a product? Number one, multi-cloud connectivity. So, you think back, like you might have a legacy approach to secure remote access that's kind of like centralized, where like all the traffic from remote users is going into your data center where you have your VPN gateway, and then from there the traffic goes elsewhere, like maybe through a direct connect into AWS or right into an application in your data center, or maybe to another data center on the other side of the planet. And it's kind of centralized because it's a legacy technology. People are saying, you know what? I'm a multi-cloud enterprise now. I'm in AWS. I'm in Azure. I still have some stuff in a private data center. I'm probably using a colo provider. I need a solution that's sort of is optimized for facilitating connectivity into all those without adding a lot of latency. So multi-cloud connectivity, number one response. Then user endpoint compliance, making sure that our users are actually using our secure remote access stuff instead of like getting around it through cheats or whatever and compromising our security model, which kind of plays into like, is it easy for our users to like log on to the secure remote access solution? Are we putting up a barrier by installing something that they don't know how to use or don't want to use because it slows them down? And then, no surprise, importance of scalability, ease of deployment flexibility, kind of touches on the multi-cloud connectivity piece, but also like, I don't want to have to rely on appliances. I want to rely on software. I want to rely on SaaS-based or cloud-delivered capabilities. So deployment flexibility, user experience, like that's like, I don't want my zero trust network, secure network remote access stuff to slow down video communications or WebEx or whatever. And then interoperability with other systems, like foundational one would be like an identity vendor, of course, but also like interoperability with maybe some monitoring tools that you use to trigger policy-based re-authentication requirements or whatever. So that's a big one. And also deployment flexibility and interoperability with other systems. Those two are more important to the larger enterprises in our survey, the people that were from companies with 20,000 or more employees. So those are things that if you're in a larger company, you want to pay attention to. 56% of the people in the survey told us that it was very important that a secure remote access solution could terminate access to an authorized user in response to observed activity, which kind of plays into that interoperability with other systems. Maybe those solutions have like native monitoring capabilities in place, but it also might require like third-party monitoring to track that, like or like being, or maybe a solution that's able to like pull in the latest threat intelligence from various threat feeds and like comparing that to what's happening with users and terminating access. It's all about like it's a foundational principle of zero trust is like after you've authorized authenticated user and authorized the access and given and allowed them on your network, like you want to be able to revoke that at any point in response to potential troublesome behavior. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind as you're looking at modernizing your secure remote access solutions. So what are they using as they modernize? The top two responses were Zero Trust Network Access and Secure Access Service Edge. So ZTNA is the latest class of solutions that provide that sort of like authentication capability with granular policy control, and then access um, authorization and access through often like cloud-based proxies and then through into like an encrypted connection into your your network. SASE actually kind of works in the same way. SASE is more of like a multi-function cloud-delivered security solution with an SD-WAN component underneath it, and one of the pillars of it is often a zero trust network access solution. It often works like ZTNA. You see here, more than half of them also think VPN plays a role in modernization, which I'm not surprised by because a lot of people still think VPN is a viable technology. They haven't really recognized some of the legacy faults of VPN technology, or they're being marketed to by VPN vendors who are heavily marketing whatever they're doing to adhere to zero trust principles in one way or another. And but yeah, so it still remains a relevant technology. And in my experience, anecdotally, when talking to people about their remote access solutions in the zero trust era, it's like they have like one solution that they use for a certain class of users that are, more likely to be working with sensitive data, and then they have another solution that is more affordable, easier to use and implement, that is for another set of users that are low risk because they just don't work with sensitive data, or with sensitive applications. And so that's where you might see like VPN playing a bigger role, is like, oh, we have a class of vendors, a class of users that have like a less critical risk profile. Um, and then you see virtual desktop infrastructure is also relevant to a certain number of people, and so is software-defined perimeter, which is kind of sort of past the hype cycle and is somewhere in the trough of disillusionment, I think. Um, People who told us they were operating a hybrid cloud and or a cloud only um, environment in terms of where their applications and their data live, they were more likely to tell us that ZTNA and SASE, Secure Access Service Edge, play a big role for them. And then people who were data center only, when they had nothing in the cloud, the public cloud today, they told us that they were gravitating towards software-defined perimeter technology, which probably tells you like what kinds of environments uh, those types of solutions are ideal, at least suited for. ZTNA and SASE are appealing to hybrid cloud environments and cloud only. Uh, we also zoomed in on zero trust network access for this because, as you can see, it is the sort of number one solution people are looking to modernize secure remote access. So we asked them, where are you in implementing that? 31% said we're in production, 61% said we're implementing, 8% said we're researching and evaluating. So now let's look at zero trust segmentation, which is all about reducing lateral movement. Once you've given something access to your network, now you want to sort of limit what they can communicate with. You also want to limit what things inside your network can talk to other things inside your network, because, for example, there's rarely any reason why you would want like an application responsible for managing like your automated systems in a factory, like the systems that are automating the assembly line in a factory. There's no reason why that application should ever talk to like your finance application that governs your accounts payable and whatnot. So having a granular segmentation scheme to limit lateral movement with both things that live within your network, but things that are coming in from outside your network is a foundational piece of zero trust strategy. We ask people, what if you're doing zero trust network segmentation today, what parts of your network are you focusing on? And three big ones were data center, public cloud, and SaaS applications, secure software as a service applications. So that third one is that's one where DNS could really help you, but that's about like limiting who can access the software that you consume as a service. The other two are like limiting um, um, what can talk to what inside your data center and inside your VPCs and public cloud environments. Of less interest around zero trust segmentation were things like campus networks and branch office networks and so forth. But still a healthy number. We're doing both. Then we also asked them, what kinds of segmentation technologies are you using today? Number one response, security appliances. So a firewall, which means that more than half of people are tromboning traffic through a firewall into and back, so like you got one entity inside your network wants to talk to another entity inside your network rather than talk directly, which would be most efficient. They're going to upstream to a firewall and back down, probably adding some latency, possibly some other deleterious performance issues to that communication stream by tromboning traffic through an appliance. So not most efficient, but it's the way people have been doing it for things for a while. Number two, layer 3 technology like routing zones and access control lists. Another well-established approach, not as granular as other options, but what it's telling me is like most people are really not working towards using the latest generation of segmentation capabilities for zero trust inside their networks. What you see here is like secondarily, actually tied for second with layer 3 technologies, hypervisor-based microsegmentation. So software overlays implemented through the hypervisor in a data center or or in the cloud, and sort of segmenting the network with something like VXLAN, for instance. That is secondarily popular and a secondary preference to just good old-fashioned security appliances like firewalls. And then you see 46% said they're looking at host-based microsegmentation, which is a viable option both in data centers and clouds, but also in campus environments, possibly. So those are and so like microsegmentation, which is kind of the vernacular in limiting the default approach to implementing zero trust. That is like what people talk about when they're talking about zero trust segmentation. That is secondary to traditional approaches to network segmentation. Fifth after host-based microsegmentation was like layer 2 stuff like VLANs, which is probably one of the least granular options for segmentation, but it was still somewhat popular. So let's talk about overall outcomes. Only 35% of the people in our survey told us that they felt that their zero trust strategies had been a complete success so far. So most people saw room for improvement. Some said they're outright. I think like 5 or 6% said that they had actually failed. The rest were like, we're doing okay, could do better, or we're neutral and weren't really sure if they're doing well or badly. Here are some of the challenges these are the top challenges, actually, not some of the challenges, but the top challenges that emerged in our research around a zero trust project. So with the secure remote access component of a zero trust initiative, 40% said that when they're modernizing secure remote access for zero trust principles, they're really struggling with like the risk of compromised credentials, which makes sense because a lot of them are still relying on VPN, at least to some extent, and that is one of the biggest risks of VPN. If you're using something like a ZTNA solution or a SASE solution, compromised credentials are easier to spot through the ongoing monitoring for suspicious behavior. And then adapting legacy technology. So makes sense. A lot of them are relying on VPNs. So yeah, that's an issue. And then 39% said they're also struggling with diverse devices, like device diversity. So, um, we're still trying to figure out how to put an effective VPN client on an iPhone or something more challenging. We're, you know, converging operational technology onto our IT network, like, you know, assembly line automations systems from a factory, oil and gas operations from a remote oil field, medical imaging stuff. We want to be able to apply secure remote access to that stuff from a remote location, but we don't have the ability to put a client on it. So what do we do? Around segmentation, 38% said they're dealing with a high volume of changes and exceptions. Most of the micro-segmentation vendors that I look at, like they're software defined and have like centralized change control that can make that high volume less painful. Even better if you've got an automation solution plugged into it. But people that are relying on firewalls probably have a lot of like standalone firewalls in different locations managing segmentation. They got to manage policy across all those. Same thing if they're relying on like layer 2, layer 3 segmentation stuff like VLANs and subnets and ACLs and stuff. They've got to like change configurations on individual devices. It's harder to handle that high volume of changes and exceptions. The other big segmentation issue they complained about was inconsistent segmentation capabilities across different networks. So I got one thing I'm using in my cloud provider. I got another thing I use in my data center, and I actually use a second thing in my data center for bare metal workloads because my hypervisor solution isn't compatible with it, or I don't like the way it's compatible with it. So there's that. And then overall business challenges for Zero Trust. Number one, budget, which is no surprise, especially if the network team's involved. They might not have as much budget as a cybersecurity team might be used to. Personnel and skills gaps, it's a constant refrain. Like we struggle to hire and retain personnel, especially. I did research earlier this year where I was asking network teams, like, what are the skills that are hardest for you to hire for? And the number one and number two response was network security. I think it was number one actually. And then number two was probably either network automation or just basic monitoring and troubleshooting. And then number three, and overall business challenges, conflicts and collaborations issues with cybersecurity, which I was worried about when I started this project. And there it is, number three in business challenges. Like the network team is not great at working with the cybersecurity team. So that question was like, overall, what are the business challenges that are struggling, that are causing the most pain for your network team in the Zero Trust project? And that was number three. And then technical challenges network teams are struggling with: integration with infrastructure. So, I've adopted this new Zero Trust, shiny new Zero Trust thing, and it doesn't integrate well with my network. Like there are certain parts of my network that probably should be refreshed and it's not playing well with it. Like I should probably replace that vendor, but I don't have budget. And then number two, technical challenge, poor network observability. And as I noted, majority of the people in the survey think that it's important for network observability to be in position to support a Zero Trust initiative. One, for not for threat detection and analysis and response, but also to understand how Zero Trust impacts performance. So 34% name that a top issue for them, having not enough monitoring capabilities in place to support zero trust. And then we asked people, aside from improved security, what other benefits do you expect from your zero trust security strategy? Number one response, improved network resilience and reliability. Our research over the last few years has found that security incidents are a major driver of downtime and degraded performance of networks from the perspective of the NetOps team. And so obviously, like, the network team sees this as an opportunity. Like, if we can reduce security risk and security incidents, then our overall network resilience is going to improve, which is a key mission for our group. Nearly 49% told us that they anticipate better alignment of IT with the business, probably because if you have an effective zero trust architecture in place on your network, then you're less resistant to change because you're going to feel like you can implement new services for the business when they ask for them to be implemented without having to spend too much time doing a security review. Like, you've got a flexible zero trust architecture in place. It can onboard new business initiatives more quickly. And then number three, not just better resilience, but improved performance and user experience, which is the guiding principle of the network team as they're involved in zero trust. It's the second of two nearly equal pillars with reducing unauthorized access. They are building zero trust onto the network with performance in mind, and as a result, they expect the network to actually perform better once they've completed this project. Probably because they're eliminating legacy security technology that has impeded performance in the past, inefficient traffic network paths, uh, appliances that add latency while they're analyzing traffic and allowing or disallowing traffic, things like that. More efficient architecture, a more efficient security architecture improves performance. And then flexibility, responsiveness to change, operational efficiency, improved regulatory compliance. The opportunity that most don't see is reduced costs. We're not going to actually save money here because zero trust isn't cheap. And then 85% said that their zero trust implementations is making networking and security easier to manage, which kind of plays into what I already sort of characterized through my discussion of IT and business alignment, but also 50% said that they have automated their zero trust tools and workflows. So we're seeing zero trust sort of push more automation onto the network, and it's clearly having a positive result, since 85% are telling us that their zero trust initiative has made it easier to manage networking and security. So that's something to keep an eye on, like, as you're building zero trust onto your network, like, you really should be thinking about automation as well. So final thoughts. Zero trust is more effective when network teams are equal partners with cybersecurity. And one of the reasons for that, well, one reason for it, not on this slide, is that they know a lot of the technology that's involved in such an initiative. But secondarily, like, they have identified performance as a key target for the whole project. And that's going to, I think, lead to better results. As secure remote access is modernized, we're seeing a lot of ZTNA engagement overall. Majority of them have named it as like the best technology for this project, and most of them are engaged with it in some way, and it's very high among people that are using the cloud. And the cloud is clearly the future. So ZTNA is really starting to capture people's minds. Zero trust segmentation is mostly based on legacy technology like firewalls and routing. Many see DNS as an opportunity here. There are plenty of people that are engaged with newer modern micro segmentation solutions, and hopefully those will increase over time, or newer solutions will come along that are even better. But right now, older technologies, the way people are doing things, and reducing or minimizing lateral movement isn't apparently a very high priority at the moment anyway. It's a lot of the energy seems to be going into secure remote access modernization instead. So that's what we're seeing, and I want to thank you for joining us today. Here's a screenshot of the cover of the report. You can click on that link to learn more about the paper, the report, and download it. And now I'm going to turn it over to Raleigh for Q&A.
Thanks, Shamus. I will be sending a follow-up email later today that will include the on-demand playback as well as additional information about this new research. Shamus, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the questions. The first one is, did you see fundamental differences in the responses of deploying ZT between IT and OT environments? What were they, and what were the biggest barriers for both?
The questions that we asked people didn't really provide an opportunity to see that difference. We didn't ask specific. I don't have specific data on that particular distinction, so I can't really give you a meaningful answer to that question.
Thanks, Shamus. Why are so few people focused on stopping lateral movement?
I think it's an education and information environment issue. Most of the prominent solution providers I see out there that are talking about zero trust, they're mostly selling something in the secure remote access realm, like ZTNA, SASE, whatnot, and they're attacking that problem. They're not really talking about lateral movement. There are some vendors that are moving towards like universal or unified zero trust network access, where they're sort of extending their policy model into the local area network, but it still doesn't really do much around segmentation. It's more about like replacing network access control in a local area network. So what you're seeing is most of the marketing is in the remote access piece. I also think that there's a perception that microsegmentation, which is like where the conversation is around stopping lateral movement and zero trust, is perceived as difficult and complex and prone to errors that can, block legitimate traffic, or and there's the whole, we noted there's a lot of concern around high volumes of change and exceptions and things. So I think they're falling back on existing segmentation technologies that have been there all along, and relying on that for limiting lateral movement, which means they're not really putting zero trust energy into the lateral movement piece. They're really focusing on the the elimination of unauthorized access, because that seems like a problem that is easier to solve, because there are a lot of vendors that are, saying, buy our product and you've solved it.
And is AI adoption driving more interest in zero trust, given all the data that AI uses?
Yeah, 45% of the respondents in this survey said that AI projects or initiatives were driving interest in zero trust. And I'm hearing from a lot of vendors that this is something that's guiding their strategies as well. Like they're like vendors that are focused on secure, like ZTNA, SD-WAN, secure access service edge. Many of them are starting to think about things in terms of the needs of an AI architecture or AI application environment. There's a need to protect data at the edge, in the cloud, and in transit. Like a lot of training of large language models will involve like pulling large amounts of corporate data from different parts of your network. And the inference of once you've trained the AI model, now that it's like making inferences or deriving inferences from the data you feed it, it's going to be pulling even more data from the edge. Like, hey, I have built an AI model that's just going to look at data from my oil field and like tell me, whether I should plan to shut down this field or expand it or whatever. Or I want an AI model to pull security video footage regularly from all these different edges. That's data that you want to protect, whether it's in transit or at rest. And so I think that's driving a lot of uh, zero trust interest. And also they're thinking about like how to optimize the movement of that traffic from a latency perspective as well.
Good insights. Thanks, Shamus. Let's take one more question. How does multi-cloud affect zero trust strategy?
Yeah, first, multi-cloud enterprises tend to be further along with zero trust. That's one thing that we saw in this research. If people, because we asked the question like how many cloud providers you use, and the more cloud providers they had, the further the more advanced they were with their zero trust implementation. Like they were more likely to have something have completed a project if they had multi-cloud, and that tells me that it seems like the multi-cloud and environment, the world of multi-cloud networking and multi-cloud infrastructure creates some level of risk and complexity that forces enterprises to be more aggressive with zero trust. Um, and if you recall from a previous slide in this uh, presentation, multi-cloud connectivity was the #1 requirement for a zero trust secure remote access solution. So that's going to affect product selection and implementation. It also drives people away from relying on zero trust remote access solutions that are natively offered by cloud providers. Like if you're not, because multi-cloud um, organizations want like a more consistent, unified security policy model from across all their clouds and their private environment as well. And so if you're using like each native secure remote access offering that each of your cloud providers offers, you're going to have a lot of complexity in management. Um, we also saw multi-cloud organizations had more interest in using DNS-based solutions to enforce zero trust policies by blocking malicious domains, for instance, or steering traffic to the best proxy for um, remote access. Like, oh, you're coming from here, I'm going to send you to this cloud-based proxy for authentication and authorization because it will give you the best performance. So there's that as well. Um, and yeah, so you know, it makes people more aggressive and also influences some of the decisions they make.
Excellent. Thank you, Shamus, and thank to the audience for taking time out to join us today. As I mentioned, you will be receiving a follow-up email with resources from today's event. I also invite you to check out the sponsor websites as well for their solutions and additional information about this research report. Thank you again for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.